Tom, you had, and I had quite the week. I got to go drive over $2 million worth of cars, and you got to go to Alaska to go off-roading. Now, that is a winner, chicken dinner.
Absolutely, yeah. So I had an amazing overlanding adventure with our friends over at BF Goodrich, where they flew us out to experience their new all-terrain tire. But in the process, I got to drive some super rad Toyotas over off-road trails that I have never ever experienced.
Where'd you go?
Well, we were outside of Anchorage, a couple hours outside in a little town called Talkeetna.
Yeah, I heard that's the climbing, I'm going to use a term here for climbers, dirtbag capital of the world. There's a lot of people who go climbing up there. It's just a beautiful city, and it's kind of like Gold Hill here, except much more remote with a lot bigger mountains around it.
Right, so amazing experience, and we're going to talk about what it was like doing some overlanding through the Alaskan bush. You can talk about how you managed to convince a bunch of manufacturers to finagle your way into some very expensive cars. And we'll talk about some tire myths debunked, including tire sizes, why a 35 isn't actually a 35, talk about the crazy world of three-peak snow rating, and why tires are a lot more complicated than you think. So we'll have a great chance to interview somebody at BF Goodrich later on in this video.
All right, so I got to drive. I'll name the cars, and you tell me which one you want to hear about.
Okay.
Okay, the Rolls-Royce Spectre, which is a new all-electric two-door Rolls. The Audi, which I've always wanted to drive. Avant RS6, that's a station wagon. The McLaren Artura, which is a new hybrid McLaren. And the Fiat 500e designed by Beauty.
Which one of the four does not belong? That's a funny combination right there.
Which one do you want to hear about? I'm dying to know. Is it the Fiat, Tommy?
You know, strikingly, it's not the Fiat.
It is, okay.
No, it's not the Fiat. No,
Right.
What was that Rolls like? That Rolls
Oh, the
Royce?
Spectre was cool. So here's the thing, right? If there's any car that should be electric, it's a Rolls-Royce, because let's face it, Rollses have always been heavy. They've always sought to be as quiet as possible. And so, adding a ton of batteries to a Rolls-Royce, which make the car extremely quiet because you don't have all that V12 noise cluttering up the atmosphere, makes for a very spectacular $500,000 car. But dude, the colors, oh my God, they were, it was and I just forgot. P.
So some variant on P, we know that. Was it yellow?
One was chartreuse.
Okay.
Which is this kind
I don't think Rolls-Royce would call it P.
They called it chartreuse and peony.
Peony,
Chartreuse
okay.
and peony. What a combination of colors. Alex from Alex on Autos was like out of his mind about how ugly this thing was. So it's kind of, chartreuse is kind of this weird color, and peony is kind of this like sort of pinkish blueberry color, and you combine the two. And the feeling was that somebody ordered these two, because Rolls-Royce does bespoke vehicles, right? So you can have it in any flavor, color you want, as long as you pay for it. And the feeling was that somebody had ordered this car, and then they decided against buying it, and then they put it into their press fleet.
Hey, podcast listeners and TFL Talk viewers. I wanted to take a minute to talk to you about a quick and simple way to sell your car or truck with the help of our new partner, HighRoad. With HighRoad's online portal, you enter your vehicle's VIN number or plate, mileage, and zip code, and you'll get competing offers from several qualified dealers in your area within seconds. You pick the best deal offered and follow through with the dealer to sell your car. No more managing scammy emails from buyers on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. No more time wasted on no-show buyers. No bait and switch with a "will you take a check" excuse from sketchy buyers. Now keep in mind, these offers will be for trade-in values of your vehicle. If you want to go through the hassle of getting more for your car, that's up to you. But if you want to sell your car hassle-free and fast, go to tflcar.com and click Sell Your Car in the navigation menu. Or click on the HighRoad ad at the bottom of the website if you're on mobile, or click on the column if you're on a desktop. HighRoad makes it easy, and we like easy.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I did get to drive it. I did a kind of a road trip review. I've been doing these road trip, how I do the trail guides. Well, I've been doing the same kind of idea, except for now on-road reviews, where we go to someplace scenic and then talk about how the car drives. So I did get to road trip it. It is a big, expensive, beautiful, luxurious, in your face. I mean, I'm just trying to think of ways to describe this. Two-door coupe. You've got lamb's full. The first thing you notice is you've got lamb's wool that's like maybe a half an inch deep. When you put your shoes on that carpet, you feel like you should take your shoes off. And then, of course, everything you touch feels extremely luxurious. Everything you see looks extremely luxurious. And there's no RPM meter. It's just a power meter, just like Rolls-Royce does, right? Because Rolls-Royce was known for not telling you how much power it has, but letting people know that the amount of power is adequate. Well, this is more than adequate, dude. I'm thinking 0 to 60 in like 5 seconds, about 260 miles of all-electric range. And then Rolls-Royce will tell you the people who buy these things aren't worried about any of the things I've just said, because if they want to go more than across town, they'll take a helicopter, which I think is probably true.
What's the sticker on this car?
It's over $500,000.
Oof.
Yeah, it's over $500,000. But I could tell you, I felt extremely calm. I was super nervous because I had to review 11 cars in 2 days. And so the stress level is through the roof. And then you get inside this thing, you push the button, the door, of course, closes because you couldn't be bothered to close the door yourself. That was one thing I didn't like. They're suicide doors. So I kept hitting the back of my leg on the door. I understand now why people got away from suicide doors. While they may be cool, they're not very practical. Especially these things, which are about as long as a freight train. They're probably the longest doors I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, the door slams, and you're just surrounded in opulence, comfort, and silence. And then, without you knowing it, the car is running because it's electric, of course. And you put it in drive, and you just float down the little road looking at all of the other cars and feeling sorry for them because they're not in the same opulence as you are. Now, of course, it's great being a journalist and doing this because you kind of feel like you're only renting this and not owning it. I think I would feel very self-conscious if I was owning it, but quite the experience.
All right, well, so if you have $500,000, there you go. The Rolls-Royce Spectre returned to the personal luxury coupes, which were all the rage 50, 60 years ago.
I could have told you about the 500E.
Yeah, that's true.
Designed by Beauty or Passion or whatever.
I'm
it
not,
was rose gold, Tommy.
Yeah, the color on that thing was something else.
And it had an Italian flag.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the KO3 adventure, Dan, because I think that a lot of our audience is interested in the world of four-wheel drives. And granted, it doesn't have suicide doors or the ability to close it at the push of a button, but I did have a really cool trip up to Alaska to hit the dirt with this new tire and a bunch of cool Toyotas. So we actually flew into Anchorage, spent the night in Anchorage. The weather this time of year can be very hit and miss, and certainly when I landed, it was feeling a little Soviet. It was very overcast.
Dark and overcast and rainy, I bet.
Yeah, and then from Anchorage, the following morning, we actually took, I would strongly recommend you guys do this if you have the opportunity, the train from Anchorage to Talkeetna. It's a couple of hours, but you kind of wind through these majestic valleys with these big trees on either side.
I mean, you're by Denali there, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the cruise ship lines have that program where you cruise up the Inside Passage, and then eventually you get to Anchorage, and then you get to go to Denali and check that out.
Yeah, but this is a really cool way to experience Alaska. And actually, the cars we were with are from a company called Alaska Overlanders. Uh-huh. And basically, what they're doing is they're trying to fight that cruise ship culture, that kind of very manicured.
I remember there's just a ton of buses there, a lot of like Asian tourists. It feels very weird.
The industrial complex of the cruise ships.
Yeah.
And the idea is you can go and rent a fully kitted out 4Runner or Tacoma for your off-road adventures, your camping trips. Yeah, and then you don't need to bring your own rig up. You don't have to worry about transport if you need to ship it down. They're there ready to go. You rent them, and then you can go have some fun out in the woods and get a real Alaskan experience. So they brought out a group of 4Runners and Tacomas, all white and black. And then they took us up a trail outside of Talkeetna. We were 23 miles outside of Talkeetna at this little roadhouse. And I got the name of the trail here because I definitely want to remember it. It's called Petersville Road. And what was cool about this is it wasn't a super technical trail. There were a couple of parts where you do need four-wheel drive low, but it's exactly what you'd expect Alaska to be, right? These enormous expanses of wilderness, and you're driving through these rivers. It's super rainy in Alaska, and the guys are saying most trails are more like rivers than trails, and you're going up these flowing river banks like you're driving through Jurassic Park. It was just amazing.
Now, when I was up there with you for the Motor Mountain series that we did, God, it must be 10 years ago now, where we drove our Jeep Wrangler to the 50 highest points in all 50 states. We actually stopped right there and did some off-roading. We tried to drive the Jeep to where, if you read Into the Wild, you know that there was a young man who got stranded on the other side of the river.
Yeah, Chris McCandless.
Yeah, and we tried to drive that trail all the way to the bus that he eventually perished in. And it was interesting off-roading, I agree. It's much different than Colorado. I mean, we're kind of high arid desert up here, so we either get snow or we get dirt and dust. We never get like mud and a lot of rain. And so this was a lot of like almost boggy driving. Was that what you experienced, or were you just driving through rivers?
No, it wasn't a lot of mud. It was almost all rivers and kind of shale. Not a lot of really big rocks and boulders like we kind of experience here in Colorado.
That's nice. It must be much more comfortable than, bounding across like these watermelon-sized boulders that just, shake you to bits.
But there's definitely a lot of dirt roads that have kind of eroded down into trails over the years. And then there's a lot of folks, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's some folks hunting out there as well. So that's primarily what this network of trails is used for. But it's one of the coolest experiences because in a matter of minutes, you go from Talkeetna, which is not a very big town to begin with, into complete and utter serenity with just no one around for what appears to be miles and miles and miles.
So did you see any bears or any moose?
Yeah, we saw a moose,
Okay.
which was very cool.
Yeah.
And then the time of year we went is beautiful because all the colors are changing and you get these magnificent yellows and reds, but it also rains a lot. So we didn't get that view of Denali that I think a lot of folks were hoping for, but it didn't really matter because everywhere you look, it was just stunning. I mean, it was one of my favorite places I've ever been, Alaska. I really was amazed, and people were super friendly there, really accommodating, and I thought they'd be a little bit more standoffish, but for the most part, folks were really nice. And so when we went up there, we went up and did the Dalton Highway, which is super north, right?
Yeah, it's north of Fairbanks.
Fairbanks and north.
It goes up to obviously Dead Horse or Prudhoe Bay, whatever you want to call it.
I'm glad we did that, but I wouldn't do it again. I think you get as good, if not better, scenery a little further south.
Sure.
And you're not quite as stuck in these really bitter cold areas, right?
No, I mean, yeah, Fairbanks is crazy cold, especially in the winter, and then you're down to, too much light in the summer and very little light in the winter.
So like where we were at, we still had normal light patterns and it wasn't super cold, at least this time of year. And we hadn't quite gotten snow and it was not that far from Anchorage. So I mean, this was ideal for me.
All right, tell me about the vehicles you were using.
Yeah, so they were 5th gen Forerunners and 3rd gen Tacomas of various states of kind of lift. They're all a little bit different, but most of them were running like a 2-inch lift. A lot of them had tents on them. All of them had racks and awnings, and they had compressors in the back and some recovery stuff. So they were all kitted out, ready to go, and that's how this company rents them. And then you basically just grab your truck and you just go for as many days as you want. You rent it per day, I believe. And
you know how much it costs?
I don't know how much it
costs.
costs.
Did you look into it?
No, I should. I'm sure it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, it seems like in Alaska there's a 25% surcharge on everything,
Sure,
including hotel rooms, fast food. And I'm sure, with this, because it's just expensive to get all that stuff up there, right?
Yeah, but it's interesting how less manicured and how many fewer rules there are in Alaska than in Colorado.
Yeah, it's much easier to get eaten by a bear.
When I was talking to the event coordinator, I was like, so was it tough getting permits for this? And they're like, we talked to the Park Service, the Forest Service,
and the bears,
BLM people. Nothing was required to set up this event, they said. It's all just public land available to anybody.
Yeah, I think that's why people think of it as the last frontier, right?
Sure.
People here, especially in the lower 48, have to do a lot of trail permits.
Right, there's a lot of rules regarding off-roading down here. And up in Alaska, there's such few rules.
You know why that is, too. There's just a lot fewer people up there.
Right.
So the impact of having, I don't know how many of these foreigners they have running around, but,
like 20 of them.
Yeah, have you gone up like Imogene in the middle of summer? I mean, it's a parade, dude.
Yeah. You could go for hours and not see anybody on any trails,
which is glorious.
Yeah.
So how do these older were these TRD Pros? It looks like a TRD Pro.
No, that's an SR5.
Okay. How do they do?
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. No problems. They had kind of a mixture of TRD off-roads and SR5s, and what I found, at least from where we were at, is none of the terrain was all that challenging. There was a couple spots where we had deep water, probably up to the floorboards. And there's a couple spots where you want to pick a smart line to avoid some mud holes, but for the most part, it's just kind of easy cruising, like probably 3 to 5 level trails.
It also must be nice not to have to go on like shelf roads.
Well, I'm sure they have plenty of those.
I'm sure they do, but you didn't deal with that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would be really psyched to actually drive up a river as opposed to the stuff we're doing. So I feel jealous because you got to do some really crazy fun off-roading, that we don't really normally get to do.
And then, so BF Goodrich invited us out to check out their new KO3 tire.
Yeah.
Which replaces the KO2.
We have a car with that, a truck.
Yes, the Ranger Raptor.
Yeah, the Ranger Raptor is the first vehicle to actually get that tire.
Although one of the things I learned is that tire is actually a little different than what you can buy off the shelf.
Oh, so Ford, usually the dealio with manufacturer tires is, and I'm not accusing Ford of this, but they put out kind of an RFP, right, request for proposal, and in my experience, the most important thing that the manufacturer wants is cost.
Yeah, it could be.
It's not about getting the highest performance tire. It's about getting the least expensive tires all too often.
Well, if Ford wanted that, they should not have gone with BF Goodrich.
They're expensive, I know.
These are really expensive.
So what, did you ask the guy about the difference between
Yeah, so what they do is they're working with a few different OEMs,
Yeah.
Ford being one of them, right? And like what the companies will do is they'll go to them and say like, look, we want to put your tire on this vehicle,
Sure.
but we have parameters that this tire has to meet.
Of course.
Be that longevity, be that noise, be that acceleration standards. So the example they gave is like one of the OEMs, all they care about, the biggest thing they care about is dry weather braking. Like that's the standard that's above anything else is can this tire meet the braking targets in the dry? So they change the tires a little bit for every manufacturer, but then their consumer tire is just the best tire that they can make across what they think is the widest variety of standards.
And I understand that a lot of the markings on the tire have to do with SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers standards that the manufacturers agreed upon. But I think if you were to ask me what is the most confusing bit of kit in the automotive world, I would say it's a tire, because they have done a really good job in confusing people with the different kinds of tires that are out there, right? You think that there are like 5 different kinds of tires, and you think that those would be very easily distinguishable. So, we have summer tires, and then we have winter tires, and then we have all-season tires. But that's not the way it works. It's much more confusing than that.
Well, you have all-terrain tires and mud terrains, and then all-weather tires.
Yes.
But they all kind of fall into this one
Then you have all-terrain tires that are 3-peak rated, and then some aren't 3-peak rated.
All KO3s are 3-peak rated.
And then if you do some digging, what the 3-peak rating means is, if I remember right from my research, is that it could accelerate from 0 to 60 in a certain amount of time. It has nothing to do with like braking. It has nothing to do with cornering.
So I asked about that, and we'll learn a little bit more about that in the interview up here. But basically, it's a modified pickup with a bed removed and then this special jig added. And they have a standard that all the manufacturers have decided is the standard you have to meet a certain percentile.
Wait, modified pickup with a jig. I have no idea what that means.
It's got like...
what are you talking about? What is that?
It's like it's a way that they can control the tire speed on a vehicle. It's a special scientific device. I don't fully understand it.
See what I mean?
Engineer. But basically, the tire has to have a certain level of grip above a set standard in order for it to be considered a 3-peak snow-rated tire. So it's like 110th percentile instead of 100 percentile.
And now let me ask you this, okay? This is what I mean it's so confusing. You have all-season tires, which we know are pretty much, the master the what's that saying? Where
Jack of all trades.
All trades, and master of none.
Yep.
In other words, they're pretty crap in all conditions, except for maybe nice dry days. And then you have snow tires, right? But now you have these all-weather tires, right?
But that
come on.
All-weather tire has been a game changer.
I like the all-weather tires.
And really,
they're loud.
I think that should, for most people, replace the all-season if you live in a snowy environment, because it's 80% of the capability of a snow tire, in my opinion, without a lot of the sacrifices of having to take them off in the summer.
Yeah, so you don't have to keep going to your local tire shop.
So it's like a Cross Climate 2 is an all-weather tire.
But the problem with them is they're loud and they're stiff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology is going to get better on them.
Yeah,
right?
we've used them now for 3 years in a row. So we had them on our Model Y, we had them on our Model 3.
Part of the problem, I think, is that those cars are just loud and stiff. Like my sister-in-law has them on a Venza.
Yeah.
And they're a bigger profile and they're not nearly as bad. So I think it also depends on the size and application. But
I don't know how good they are. So we've ran them for 2 years. And in general, you think of Colorado, we do get a lot of snow, but we don't get a lot of that kind of. If you go to like Alaska, where you have ice under the snow, right? And what makes snow tires so great is the compound that actually grips on ice. And what you're missing, I think, on the all-weather tires is you have the tread pattern that's good for snow, but you don't necessarily have the compound that's good for ice.
Well, if you're on ice, nothing's going to help you. I mean,
they'll say that dedicated snow tires are actually better than studded snow tires, and they've got proof of that on ice. They've got these little
but on a pure 100% like ice sheet.
Yes, I've done that. I've taken a Bentley.
Yeah, and the race guys, are they running snow tires or are they running studs?
No, they're running nails.
Yeah, they're running studs, right? So on a pure ice, a stud is going to be what you want.
Well, hold on. I said you just gloss over this. This is like family. Dude, studs are one thing, right? They're little metal, like the top of a nail, right, that you screw into the tire. Nails are actually nails that poke out the other side. So when I said they're running nails, I don't mean they're running studs. I mean they're running
big studs.
They're not studs. They're like nails that are poking out, right?
Well, we'll agree to disagree. A nail is kind of a big stud in a tire application.
One goes in pointy part down. One goes pointy part out.
I understand the difference. Yeah.
I mean, I was at this ice racing, and I had this crazy Bentley that I had taken there because I thought that
snow tires.
On snow tires, I got it out on the lake in Georgetown, and the thing barely moved.
Sure.
And then there was a huge wind, and there were these guys running these studded, I guess would be the word for them, race tires, right? And they were tearing up like quarter or a half-inch chunks of ice, just flinging them all over the place, and the wind was whipping them up and smashing them against the Bentley, and I was terrified that I was
yeah. So I think what is important here, and this is what I took away from this trip, is tire technology is not black and white like I kind of thought it was.
Okay.
So if I were to say what's the difference in compound between a snow tire and a all-season tire?
Look, here I'm gonna show you a picture of that.
Yeah, those are just giant studs.
It looks like a porcupine. I'm showing I'm showing Tommy, for all of you guys who can't see it.
So
a picture of a studded race tire.
So when you talk about tire compounds, right?
Okay, go ahead.
The common misconception is that a soft tire will grip better and will be shorter lived, and a firm tire won't grip as well but will be longer lived.
Okay.
And apparently that is not correct. The way that tire compounds are developed is a lot more complicated than that. You can have a soft compound that'll last 10 times as long as a firm compound, and you can have a firm compound that'll last 10 times as long as a soft compound. There's a lot of chemistry that goes into the rubbers behind these tires, and that's actually been the big evolution in tires in recent decades. Has not been tubeless to tubeless or radial to bias ply to radial. It's the actual tire tech which has improved. So I don't really fully understand it still because it's you could spend your whole life studying it.
So why don't we go to the expert and find out? You said there are 3 myths that you debunked?
Yeah, there's a couple. We talked about the value added proposition for buying a new KO3.
Yeah.
We talked about why a 35-inch tall tire isn't a 35-inch tall tire. He explained some of the tests that they put these tires through. He talks about the snow peak rating thing and the test and whether or not it's valuable or not. And this guy is a really super cool guy. His name is Brandon Sturgis. He's been with BFG a long time. He used to be a test development engineer, kind of a test driver. Now he's head of the brand for BFG. So super cool guy, really knowledgeable. And sometimes these interviews can be a little stiff and uncomfortable, but Brandon was super open, so we'll get some more info about how the world of tires works.
All right, let's roll that interview.
All right, guys, so we got so folks, you're joining me today doing something really special. We're bounding down this rough dirt road 20 miles into the wilderness outside of Talkeetna, Alaska, with a really special guest. And Brandon, can I have you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Hey everyone, I'm Brandon Sturgis, and I'm the global product manager for BF Goodrich with our off-road tires.
So what that means is that Brandon has been with this company for a ton of years and is one of the lead guys responsible for their off-road groups, which is really cool. And Brandon, we're out here checking out this new BFG KO3, the new BF Goodrich All-Terrain. And walk me through some of the highlights of the KO3 over the KO2.
Yeah, sure thing. So, I think one important thing to share, it's a big question that we asked ourselves when we were getting ready to start the project to work on KO3, which was, why do we need to do KO3? What is the reason behind it? And, I was sharing with folks earlier, Our technical team is really good at developing tires. They're really good at their job. And what you ask them to do, they go off and do it. And the thing is that when you do a tire development project, you want to make sure at the beginning of the project that you get your ask to them correct.
Okay.
And so for us, we wanted to do some research, what's going on in the market, what people like about KO2, what people maybe don't like about KO2. And one of the things that really stood out for us is the fact that vehicles, the vehicle evolution that we see going on is just tremendous. Vehicles are getting heavier, they're getting more powerful, they're getting more capable, they can tow more, they can haul more. And what that means is just that those vehicles, these newer vehicles, are more demanding on tires. They wear tires faster than they ever did before. And so what that means is that, in the future, today and in the future, we need to improve the wear performance really just to maintain people's expectation of wear. 10 years ago, 50,000 miles on a set of tires on a pickup truck is a lot easier than it is today.
Right. So one of the big complaints that folks I think had with the KO2 is dirt road performance, right? Kind of gravel performance.
That's right.
Is that something you have addressed in the new tire?
Yeah, so that was another thing that we really researched and talk about. I think I mentioned before, we sell KO2 in over 140 countries.
Yeah.
So not just the U.S., not just Canada, not just Mexico. We wanted to reach out to those other countries and really understand, how are people using those tires, what people like, what they don't like. And one of the big feedbacks that we got from outside of the U.S. was, hey, when we have customers that are spending a lot of time on gravel roads, the cut chip, the gravel road endurance really wasn't at the level, wasn't really meeting their expectations. And so that was, again, something else that we wanted to improve going from KO2 to KO3.
Now, when you develop a new tire, like the KO3, I'm going to relate it back to, I think, something that a lot of the viewers understand, and it's kind of the car world. So is this like a facelift, or is this an all new model? So how does tire development work when you go to a new generation?
Yeah, no, it's for us, it's starting from scratch. And so, it's a pretty interesting, fun process. I guess you can call it fun, especially from an engineering point of view. It's a different engineering challenge compared to a car, because you have materials engineers, you have mechanical engineers. You kind of have those two folks working together to come up with the right solution. So for us, KO3 was from the ground up. We wanted to rethink everything. We even thought, we've had this same looking tread pattern for a little while. Should we explore something else to try to meet that wear and gravel improvement while, trying to keep the other performances where they were? We tried that. We went down that path. It honestly did not work, and that's why even KO3 looks still a lot like KO2. But some of the things that we've learned and been able to apply in the tire development world is like vehicle data. We can buy vehicle data, so we understand for each and every tire size, what vehicle does it go on, what are the rim widths that those vehicles go on, what is the weight distribution, what is the power distribution, and that is something that's applied to the tire development. A lot of modeling. Before you cut a mold, we do a lot of modeling to try to figure out, if we design the tread pattern this way, what would it potentially do? If we design the tread pattern this other way, what are some of the trade-offs? And so a lot of modeling up front before we actually cut molds, build molds, and make tires for actual, on-vehicle and machine testing.
Now, Brandon, you were telling me off camera, you spent a lot of years actually out in the field doing performance testing on
That's
tires.
right, yep.
So walk me through that process. Like, what does that look like from an all-terrain standpoint? What kind of tests do you put these tires through?
So, a little bit of everything. Yeah, so back in the day, I like to tell people I'm now a washed-up test driver, because I used to do it. Okay. I don't do it anymore. I gotten a little older. Maybe, some of my friends joke, and a little slower. Not doing that anymore. But some of the things that we focused on at the test track was, subjective testing. So mud traction for us is a subjective test. And just a little bit of details about that test. We have two highly trained test drivers. They spend, 8 to 12 months developing their skills as being a test driver when they first start. And they don't start with the harder tests, I would say, like mud traction and snow traction. But for the mud traction test, we rent out an off-road park, and we find the right conditions to have very consistent as we can mud. And then we have 2 different test drivers that test each and every set of tires. They rate them separately. They're not chatting. They're not talking about it. And in the end, they're giving us their professional opinion about, does this one have better soft soil traction than another?
It's like Netflix dating for tires.
Yeah.
Like if Love and Blind had a BFG sponsor.
That's right.
So
that's just one aspect of testing.
Yeah,
right?
so
That's just one
mud,
thing.
and then I assume you were saying like Michigan for snow testing.
Yeah, so we go up to Houghton, Michigan. We've been going to Houghton, Michigan for years. The Ken and Weil Research Center, just a shout out to those folks up there. We've been working with them for a long time. Love their test facility. And up there we do what's called subjective snow testing. So we put tires on a vehicle. We'll have different sizes that we test on different vehicles. We run around a snow handling course. We do some acceleration and braking tests. Data acquisition in the vehicle to be able to measure that so we can see what works, what doesn't work. And then also up there is where our it's an ASTM test. It's for spin traction.
Okay.
And that's what certifies the Three Peak Mountain snowflake marking on the sidewall.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I've always wondered that, is why do some tires have a 3-peak snow rating and others don't? Is that like a standardized test across the industry? And what does that test look like?
That correct, yeah. It's a standardized test. It's done by third parties, so there's people who are qualified, certified to do that test. We pay them to do the test. They don't work for Michelin or BF Goodrich. And it's a industry standard test. What it looks like, it's just to describe it, it's a pickup truck with no bed on the back. It's a weight rack on the back.
Okay.
And so they can move that weight rack around and add weight, subtract weight to load the tire to the desired load. There's per the test method, there's a load that you apply to the tire based on the size. There's an air pressure that you run. It's all called out in the test protocol.
Yep.
And then that truck, if you actually watch the test, it's kind of boring to watch because it's literally a truck and it's got one tire, which is the test tire, and it just spins it. And when it spins it, the instrumented axle on that truck measures the force that's generated when you're trying to accelerate that tire.
Right.
And so in the end, what pops out is a number. And if you meet a certain level above a standard test tire, then you can mark Three Peak Mountain snowflake.
So it's an acceleration test.
That's right.
And it sounds like there's a traction level you have to reach. Is
That's
that
right.
like an oversimplified version?
Yep,
Now,
exactly.
I'm sorry if this sounds very coarse, but that seems like a pretty piddly way to test snow performance, because like acceleration is one thing, but what about like stopping and turning? Like, is there any of that involved in 3-peak rating?
So not in the 3-peak rating. No, not at all. The 3-peak rating is only that acceleration test,
Wow.
which is why we do that subjective, that other test protocol that I was just talking about.
Okay,
So the
interesting.
subjective testing, you can make a tire that is really good for acceleration that then doesn't want to turn.
Right.
And so that's something that we know, and we don't want that to happen because, people are going to drive the tires in the snow and they're going to have to make a turn. And we want it to work in acceleration, braking, and turning. And so we get that feedback through our test drivers, and they give us that feedback. What is the balance front and rear? What is the lateral traction versus the longitudinal traction? And so that's the way that we get a well-rounded snow performance test.
Now it almost, as like the consumer, it almost seems a little disappointing that like that 3-peak test is so, it almost seems minimal.
Yeah.
Is that based on, like, is that a legal thing, or the NHTSA says, or FMVSS says this is what it needs, or is that like an industry standard?
Yeah, and for me, I honestly don't know the history of who came together and said, hey, we want to have this, industry standard test. So I don't know the history behind it, but honestly, it's a pretty repeatable test.
Right. Okay.
And I think that's why it's recognized as the industry standard test. It's very repeatable. It's actually done over 3 different days to take into account varying snow and weather conditions. The track is prepped in a certain way,
Right.
and so it's a very good repeatable test in the snow.
But I think what's important to say though is like BFG doesn't just stop at it goes up a snowy hill. You do the braking and the handling in the snow.
Oh,
as well.
absolutely, yep. And it's just like some of the other, I mean, we could probably talk for an hour about all the different testing that we do.
Keep going, my friend. Yeah. So, like, what about stuff? I mean, do you have like a facility where you have simulated potholes? And you bring tires through, yeah?
Yeah, so the test track that I worked at for 10 years, I mean, anything that you can think of to test a tire, like, we have that ability at our test track. We actually have, so we had a pothole there that we used for quite a long time for durability testing, but you can imagine it's also really demanding on the vehicles.
Sure.
So we actually moved that test to a machine test.
Gotcha.
Right, so you can imagine, it's just to explain it to you, oh, this is fun. You're like bringing me back to my old machine testing days. Yeah, so it's a tire that's mounted on a spindle, and it's a big pendulum that comes in and whacks the tire, and that's our pothole test.
Brandon, this may be out of line, but I would love to, if I can give it to Andrew, the PR guy. It sounds like a really cool thing. Maybe one day we can come out to your facility and check that out.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like you got a lot of really cool things that people love to see, like a peek behind the curtain.
Yep.
And like they were showing us yesterday, one of the tests they have is like a metal rod that kind of jams into the sidewall.
Yep.
For sidewall intrusion.
Yeah, so
cool.
That's something that we developed ourselves, and it's because of BF Goodrich has, been doing off-road for a long time. Off-road racing, we developed our first all-terrain in Baja, and back then we didn't have all these, fancy test tracks, so we really relied on a lot of, we'll say, real-world testing and, race testing. But to a point, an engineer is an engineer, and they want to make something that is repeatable, right?
Right.
And so when you have a repeatable test, then if I change something, is that better or worse?
Right.
And so that test that we shared with you is something that simulates sidewall damage that happens in the real world. And the way that test was developed was literally some of our engineers going to off-road events, watching what people do, how they air down their tires, what pressure do they air down to, the different obstacles that they're going over. And what they found is that typically sidewall damage happens when you rake a sidewall over a rock or a tree root, and basically you open the sidewall up and then you've had a bad day.
Right.
And so, that test that we showed you is a simulation of that kind of, event that would happen when you're off-roading.
Now, speaking of airing down, I get this email a lot, and it's, what should I air my tires down to? Now, of course, that conversation is going to look very different if you have a Ram 2500 with a Cummins.
That's right, yeah.
Versus a little tiny Jeep Renegade. But from a tire manufacturing standpoint, when you develop an off-road tire like this, are you targeting a pressure where you do your development at, where you're like, this is where this tire performs the best?
Yeah, so to answer the question, I'm going back to my engineering days, and the best answer is it depends. Like the
bummer answer, Brandon.
That's what.
Keep going. Okay, that's fine.
So I have a rule of thumb. That I share with people, and it's a fairly decent rule of thumb to get around that. It depends, and the reason why I say it depends is because, well, I mean, the drive that we're on right now, we have different vehicles, different tire sizes, different loads, and different speeds that we're going.
Sure.
And so, in order for me to answer it, I would need to know, okay, well, what is the corner weights of your vehicle? What speeds are you going to be driving over what obstacles?
Okay.
And so for some of our, military fitments that we work with, some of our OEMs that we work with, we do that detail analysis for them and say, okay, well, here are the pressure recommendations that we will give you for this vehicle in these different kind of usage conditions. But it's very difficult to say for every single person out there, could you imagine the Excel spreadsheet about what this would look like? It would be massive. So my rule of thumb is, at least for our BFG tires, I'll speak for our BFG tires, is we're okay with people going down to 50, if you're not on beadlocks, if you're non-beadlock wheels, 15 PSI as long as you're not going more than 15 miles an hour.
Okay.
And so that's my general rule of thumb. You don't want to go faster at that speed because then you start getting into tire endurance concerns. So we're big on, if you air down, when it's time to get back on the road, you need to air back up.
Right.
Right. So we're big on that. The other thing about the 15 PSI is when you start getting low, you have the potential for a bead unseat. And just to give you a little bit of insight about our BFG tires, we know that people are going to air down. And so we on purpose make our beads run a little tighter on the wheels to minimize that potential bead unseat. Now there's pros and cons there. If you run your beads a little tighter on the wheel, it makes it sometimes a little harder to mount. And so we have to sometimes reinforce proper mounting procedure. And just for everyone out there, the proper mounting procedure is you want to lubricate the wheel and you want to lubricate the tire. And if you do that, then our beads will seat properly on the wheel. In many cases, when we see issues, it's that either the proper lubrication's not used, or they're only lubricating the tire, they're not lubricating it well enough, and then the beads don't seat, and then we have some issues like that. But yeah, we run our beads a little tighter so that people can air down and still feel confident that the beads are going to stay on the wheels.
So I like that rule though, 15 psi, 15 miles an hour. So
kind of easy to remember.
Yeah, yes. Of course, you just gave this eloquent explanation, and then the only thing I took away from that. Okay.
No, it's fine. I mean, but that's why I did it, like 15 and 15. Now, it doesn't work so well when you go to Europe and you got to go to bar and KPH.
Yeah, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
But if I were to take you and your KO3 tire and for let's just say examples, a 5th gen 4Runner, and plocked you off on like a 2-track trail in Alaska, would you be probably airing down to about 15, you think?
Well, I mean, we'd probably be going a little, like
a not a dirt road like this, but like an actual trail where you got some rock obstacles, you got some mud events.
Oh yeah,
like 15, kind of a good number.
Yep,
okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that's not gospel. Keep that in mind. We're not saying under all situations, but I do like that. So let's talk about another aspect that I get a lot in the comment section, and that's, hey, I don't want to buy that KO3 at a 35 by 12.5 because if people take their tape measure and they find it's 34.6, right? Or some people measure it, it's actually 34.1. So do your tires run small? Like why don't those numbers match up?
So yeah, we get that question a lot, and so. It's a little bit of an explanation, right?
I'm here for it. Let's do it.
You're here for it.
Yeah.
So there's something called the Tire and Rim Association.
Okay.
And that Tire and Rim Association, it's literally all the major tire manufacturers get together, and it's a committee, and they come up with the tire standards. So these are the design standards for tires that all the tire manufacturers are supposed to apply. And this is load, pressure, dimensions, like anything you can think of from a tire standard. The bead design, the how the bead is supposed to mount on the wheel. There's wheel standards. So this is an industry standard that that the tire manufacturers are supposed to apply. For flotation sizes, and I don't know why, this happened probably before I was born, but a 35-inch tire, the design overall diameter, so right in the middle of the design box, is actually 34.5. So a 35-inch tire, the middle of the design window is 34.5. So it's a little bit, the way I explain it to people, it's a little bit like a 2x4. A 2x4 doesn't actually measure 2 inches by 4 inches because someone said so. I don't know why with 2x4s,
but is it true that like some of your competitor tires might run a little bigger or a little smaller even if they have that 35 number on the sidewall?
Correct.
Okay.
And what I tell people is, there's no dimensional police in the U.S. to see if you're following that standard or not.
Interesting. Yeah.
But if you sell tires outside of the U.S. in other countries, you have to provide them with information on the dimensions of your tires to say you meet the standard.
Right.
And so, we sell KO3, like I said, and we're going to be selling in 140 plus countries. And so in Europe, in the Middle East, in all these other countries, we have to provide them with the dimensional data. And in that window, that dimensional window, we have to meet all the different requirements of the different countries. So the US window is like so.
Yeah.
And then each and every other country has their own window. And so in the end, we have this really small area of dimensions that our tires have to meet in order to be a global tire.
So one thing which I learned on this trip, which I don't think I realized, is the sheer number of environments and countries that this tire is designed to operate in.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
and maybe this is, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but maybe this is a little unique to BFG, and like this KO3 is not only sold in the US and Canada and Mexico, it's sold in Europe.
Yep.
It's sold in Latin America, it's sold in South America, it's sold in Australia. Is it sold in Asia?
It's sold in Asia. Yep.
And is it the same tire across every market? Like if I bought a Chinese market KO3, is it going to be the same as a Canadian market KO3?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so we want one part number that can be sold globally. We make them in different plants to serve the different markets. But for us, it was the case with KO2, and it's the same with KO3. If you buy a KO2 here, it's got to have the same performance in another country, because that's what a KO3 is.
Okay.
You know, right? So if we design it here, you know, if we did something different in a different country, that's no longer a KO3 to us. So we're pretty regimented about that. You know, we want to make sure that the tire is, you know, the tire design is copied, you know, exactly in the other places that it's made in the other countries that we sell it in.
Now, just to play devil's advocate,
Yep.
what if I came to you and was like, hey, Brandon, like, I've been noticing a lot of KO3s are being sold on RAV4s
Yeah.
in Denver that are being driven to Starbucks, right? Like, we could
Okay.
probably soften that sidewall a little bit because it's not
Yeah.
going to Kazakhstan on a 200 Series Land Cruiser.
Yeah.
So why not have different tires for different markets based on the use case?
So we do. We
Okay.
have that. We're very regimented about, if you're going to buy a KO3, you know, when we talk to, we will let people know that, you know, it's got tough sidewalls, it's got, you know, this level of snow traction, this level of mud traction. It doesn't matter what tire size you buy within KO3, it's going to have that same performance. You know, that may be a little bit different with some of our competitors, but every size is a KO3, if
Right.
that makes sense.
Right.
So, you know, to your RAV4, you know, scenario, we have another tire in our terrain family of tires called Trail Terrain. And so that's something that, you know, doesn't have the same level of sidewall toughness, doesn't have the same level of mud traction, off-road performance. And so that is a different tire maybe for someone who's going to be spending quite a bit more time on road, might be a little bit more concerned about fuel efficiency and is a little scared to move away from the original equipment tires
Right.
that were really quiet.
Right.
And so that is a different tire line for us, for a different consumer that really wants maybe less off-road performance than what we're delivering with KO3.
But if I were to buy that KO3 in the size that fits a Jeep Renegade,
Yep.
it's the same technology as something that's meant on a lifted Hilux in South American jungle.
Yeah,
It's the same stuff.
exactly.
That's interesting.
Yep.
So, you know, this evolution of KO2 to this new generation, right? The one thing I learned yesterday is the first KO launched in '99 and lasted through 2014.
That's right. Yeah.
That's a long time.
That was too long.
That's a long time,
That was
right?
too long.
And then KO2 has been 2014 to 24 now,
Yep,
right?
10
We're
years.
transitioning.
Yep.
So, like, is there really a need to redesign the KO2 if it really is that good, or is the need more the consumer wants to see a new tire and they want the cool new lug design? Like, why? Is it because there's new competition in the space? Why go through the process of spending those millions to redesign the unit?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit, maybe a little bit of all of that, but it gets back to, you know, one of the things I was just talking about, the vehicle evolutions that we're seeing.
Right.
You know, we know that people are happy today with KO2. There's a lot of things that people are happy about, but as we see more and more of these capable vehicles come into the market, you know, we want them to continue to be happy. You know, that's really fundamentally what it came down to. It wasn't that, well, we need a new look so that to give somebody something to buy. You know, there was a thought process of, we're a bit more like form and function together. Maybe some other folks do it a little bit differently, but
Yeah.
we're form and function together. And like, we want, that people think the tire looks great, and maybe that is a reason for someone to go buy KO3 because they like the look. It's a little new, it's a little fresh. But honestly, it came down more to the performance and what we saw in the market with vehicles. That's why we did KO3.
So, going on, you know, the increased weights, the increased torque, and you know, this transition now as we're seeing electrification, and I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were doing your tire development 10 years ago, 15 years ago, right? Like a 31 was a pretty sizable tire on the Wrangler TJ,
Yeah.
right? And now like a 31 is not even recognizable on a JL, and now you got a Ranger Raptor that's running a 37 from the factory.
Yeah.
Like, is there a point where BFG is like, we're done. We are not doing this tire in a 38 or a 40.
So it's one of the reasons that we still like to, we still work with OEMs to, have a few OE fitments. We don't have a lot of OE fitments in the KO2 tire line. It'll be the same with KO3. But it comes back to, the size of the tire, what can be done from a vehicle, like suspension, stability, handling. I think we're getting close to reaching that limit for, for vehicles that are approved for on-road use. It's a little bit different with, off-road use only vehicles maybe. They still can go a little bit bigger. But yeah, it's been amazing to watch the progression in the original equipment manufacturers, the size evolution, because really it was more driven by the replacement market.
Right.
Someone would buy a vehicle, they would put a lift kit on themselves, wheels and tires, and now they've got what they want. They built it how they want it. And the OEMs are now doing that and are kind of driving some of the sizes that we see now.
But being in that replacement tire market, do you see a limit in that market? Is there a point where you're like, we just physically can't build a KO3 in a 40-inch design?
So that's something that we've been working on a little bit recently, of being able to expand. We call it like taller and wider. Like how tall and how wide can you go from a tire building point of view? And a lot of it actually is led by some of our race group.
Okay.
So we have a race division, and it's a pretty interesting story. That over time, what has happened in desert racing is, vehicles start like a 35-inch tire in desert racing was pretty amazing, back in the day. Well, what happens is, the tire got bigger and the tire got stronger, the tire got better.
Right.
And then the vehicles had to catch up. Mm-hmm. And then the vehicles got to a point where they were now not the weak point, it was the tire.
Okay.
And so now the vehicles can handle a bigger, stronger, better tire. And then you start breaking the vehicles again, and then the vehicles catch up. So now we're up to 40-inch tires in desert racing.
Gosh.
And so, we've seen that in the desert racing realm. Really it comes down to, vehicle stability, right? Like in the end, if it's a road approved vehicle, it still has to have stability. It's still got to meet stability requirements, that sort of thing. And so, we keep an eye on that, and we don't want to get to a point where, it's too big and not safe, honestly, for road use.
Right. Now, going back to that OE standard equipment, like if I buy a Ford Ranger Raptor right now, it's going to have a BFG KO3 tire equipped on it.
Correct.
Now, is that tire the exact same as a tire I could go to my local retailer and buy from a replacement tire standpoint? Walk me through that.
Yep. So we sell that tire to Ford, and actually the OEMs have a requirement to us to, have that tire as an option to be able to buy in the replacement market, because it's, something could happen, right? You could buy that pickup truck, it's brand new, and 10 miles later you get a nail in it and you got to replace the tire. So so that exact tire is available in the replacement market. What we call out on our website and our data books, we put little indications there, like what manufacturer that tire is linked to. So our little code for Ford is FOR. So if you go on our website, or if you go on our data book and you see FOR under a KO3, that's the tire for the Ranger Raptor.
But I think what I'm getting at is there's a slight difference between that OE tire and what you could buy from discount for your Tacoma, right? So
well, you can buy that.
I could buy the Ford
version.
version.
The Ford version from discount. Yeah, absolutely.
But why are there differences in what the OE tire is versus a replacement tire?
Yeah, so the OEMs, they come to us with specs that are their requirement. And this is what the tires. They have an idea of what they want out of their vehicle, and then each and every part that goes on the vehicle has to deliver in the end the what they want out of the vehicle, and one of those parts is the tire. And so they have specifications for us, and really for us, we like to work. Oh wow,
Wow, that guy's having fun.
Sorry to.
It's the most Alaskan
know.
experience I've ever seen.
What was that? Was that a Suzuki?
It was a geo-tracker
Tracker.
with a hunting platform bolted to the roof.
And-
that was
and
a
no
legend.
top.
No top. No. That's an Alaskan experience right there.
And it was pink.
It was pink.
With a
Yes, that was awesome. What
Wow.
a hero. Anyway,
Yeah, so back to the OEM question. I'm trying to remember where I left off. Yeah, so they give us specifications, and a lot of it has to do with like how does it drive on the vehicle, the ride quality, the steering, the noise level, those sorts of things, rolling resistance, dry, braking, wet braking, dry braking. They have different specs, but for us, they have their specs. Well, guess what? We have our own specs too, and especially with the KO3 tire line, we keep a pretty tight box around what we allow our OE team to do.
so is it like an arm wrestle? You go in with like the Ford engineers and you're like, all right, let's see who's winning this.
I'll put it like this: our OE tire designers, they know me,
Okay.
and they know that when they're working on tire development for KO2 or KO3, that I'm going to be keeping an eye on what they're doing.
Okay.
Because, like I said, we keep a pretty tight box around it because sometimes what the OEM wants may not be exactly what the replacement market needs. I think the example that I shared with you is a lot of OEMs are, three-peak mountain snowflake, that certification on the sidewall isn't as important to OEMs, some OEMs.
It should be important to all, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's
I'm putting my foot down
Yeah.
here. I'm saying that should be important to all OEMs, but okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
we agree with you. We think it's an important, like, customers, people buy all-terrain tires because they're going to go drive in the snow
Right.
at some point.
Right.
And so we see that in the replacement market, and we're pretty firm that, okay, even KO3 for any original equipment tire, it's going to be three-peak mountain snowflake certified. And, that's kind of, that's kind of our thing, and that's the box that we keep around. So we want a KO3, even if it's tuned or maybe looks a little bit different for the OE specs, it's still going to have that same DNA as the replacement market tire line.
And
That
can
makes
you
sense.
can the layman actually look at the two side by side and see oh, the tread block's a little different?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
you might see some little difference. You might have to get right up on it and have them side by side to see some of the differences.
Oh.
If you're standing far away, you might not see it as clearly.
Right.
But the important thing is, we talked about sidewall. The OE tires are still going to have the same sidewall toughness requirements that our replacement market tires do. That level of mud traction, we want to make sure that the OE tires still have the same level of mud traction that we see with for the replacement market design. So we're pretty strict on that, and sometimes it doesn't work out,
Right.
and sometimes it's it's the way it is, right? And we might not get on a certain vehicle, we may not win that business because of our rules, but it's it's what we've done, and for us it's what has worked. And I think that if you see some of the vehicles that KO2 is on today and also KO3,
Yeah.
I think they're pretty legit vehicles, and I think it's a good pairing.
Now, one of the things which, so the Big Cheese Harold talked
Yeah.
about yesterday, right?
The big cheese.
The Big Cheese.
I'm going to start calling him that now.
Well, maybe you're going to be Big Cheese soon here. But one of the things the Big Cheese talked about yesterday, which I didn't really think about, is in the tire world, right? There's a lot of competitors in the all-terrain space.
Yeah.
But the BFG has a very distinctive look with kind of these dog bone tread
Yep.
blocks, right?
Yep.
And he talked about how, there's companies that try to copy that design. Are there patents in the tire world? How
Yeah.
does that work? Are
Yeah,
there really?
We have design patents on the tire.
Interesting, okay.
To protect our intellectual property. We have really smart engineers, and we have a really good design team that work hand in hand to come up with what you see.
Right.
And, that takes time, that takes effort. We're not just sketching this stuff on the back of a napkin and putting it in a mold and making a tire. There's thought that goes into it, time. And so, we want to protect that intellectual property that we come up with. And, I guess copies are, it's some of the best flattery, right? Like, oh, you've done something right. Somebody wants to copy you.
Not great for business, though.
Yeah, it's not great but that's why we protect ourselves
Right.
with intellectual property. And
So the reason I asked, though, is like there's historically the KO2 has been an expensive tire, right? It's on the upper end of the price point of all terrains. What distinguishes a BFG tire that makes it worth, a 20-30% bump in price compared to some of the other competitors, and especially compared to like some brands out of China that are doing what looks like a cool tire for half the price?
Well, it's part of the reason that we brought you guys here, to try to give you that little peek behind the curtain, to allow people to understand, the engineering that we put into it. It's not just, like I said, sketching things out on a napkin and putting it in a mold and kind of hoping that it works. There's some thought behind each and every bit that we do. I was explaining earlier, like new tread compounds that we use on KO3, that was not easy to do. It took some engineering, it took some iteration to figure out the recipe that we wanted for that tread compound.
Yeah.
But then we realized, oh, well, in order to process that correctly, properly through the plant, we're going to need some investments to be able to do that. And so, having people understand that, we're not just trying to do the same old thing over and over again and just change the design. There's some thought, there's some engineering, there's changes. We're putting different components in the tire, because it is a competitive space. And, our goal is, you're right, people are going to spend a lot of money on a set of tires, but we want them to be happy. And happiness comes from, they lasted, they met my expectations for wear, they performed well in the snow, they did all the things that we said they would do.
I think one of the things that's a big takeaway is, so we have this 1914 Model T, and the tire.
I have a 12 sitting right now on my.
Are you kidding?
My father-in-law is huge into
Really?
Model Ts. We got two 12. I got one in my garage, and he's got one in his garage.
Yeah. Well, I don't
Sorry
know. No, that's awesome to know. We now have two of them because I'm addicted to them. But so we went ahead and got these like replacement tires, the OE tire, and like they were made by one of your competitors, but they like say like in the tread block it's written non-skid, non-skid, non-skid,
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah,
there wasn't the understanding that you can't just write words in the tread block and have it work. But I think like a lot of people think still that like a tread block is just there to look cool. But there's a lot more that goes behind it, right?
Oh yeah,
There's a lot of
like
engineering.
that's funny. I
Yeah.
know not
Yeah, you got to get something for your Model
So
T,
I think
yeah.
back then in 1912, early 1900s, they definitely didn't have
No,
modeling.
they just willed it into being.
That's
They're like,
right, yeah.
let's make it say cool stuff in the snow.
Tire design has come a little long way since then.
What's hilarious about the non-skids is they say non-skid all the way to drive along.
Yeah.
But then back in the day, you could definitely tell when someone skid because it would stop saying non-skid.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that goes into modern tire technology. Well, Brandon, I really want to thank you for inviting me out here and kind of giving us some of the ability to showcase this story. And then my last question for you, and I asked this to Big Cheese yesterday, is
Big Cheese.
bringing it back to the history of BFG, right, which is like 140 years old. It's crazy.
Yep.
Is like in the world of tires, there are these big milestones, like the tube tires to tubeless, and then bias ply to radial. But in the last like 40 or 50 years, is there something you can point to and say, this has been the biggest evolution in tires? He had the same answer.
Yeah.
He had big sigh. What do you think is like the biggest, what's the biggest shift in tires happening?
That was big stuff back then. I mean, that was pretty major. What I would say the big evolution in tires. Oh,
You coming in with us? We got a buddy. We're doing a little interview, but feel free to hop on in.
What I would say probably is the biggest evolution in tire is the stuff that people can't see.
Okay.
It's the materials.
Yeah, okay.
That
Gotcha.
to me, like I said, I was a test driver for 10 years, and I'll go back. I'll put down BFG off-road tires for a second. I did a lot of high performance tire development. I mean, to see the grip level evolution for street tires on street cars like a Corvette, for example. Spent a lot of time behind the seat of a Corvette, so that's why I bring it up.
It's a nice little flex there. That's
yeah, we're in some good roads.
No,
here
I
now.
mean you driving Corvettes.
Oh.
That's
I thought you were talking about what we're.
no. That's
Yeah, but like the material formulators, you know, they're the unseen heroes, right? They're the folks that
Are they in white lab coats? Like
in Michelin, Michelin BFG, they actually have blue lab coats.
oh, cool.
They're
Very cool.
Then they're very coveted, by the way.
Okay. So this is a real thing.
This is a
I
real
said that
thing.
sarcastically,
Yeah,
but there's
no.
formulators.
Oh,
that are
yeah.
real deal.
If you go and look at your tires and you go look at you put it in, you got a little blue lab.
Okay, yeah,
Well, it's
interesting.
because the rubber could damage your jacket or your shirt.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
So that's where the evolution is happening now.
For me,
Okay.
that if you had to say what is the one thing since then, it's this, like I said, you can't see it, but the evolution in the rubber, the material science that has gone into tires has been the big thing. And honestly, like a lot of people haven't talked about that enough, right? It's not as cut and dry as like, oh, a radial tire. That's maybe something that's a little easier to see. But the material science, I would say, is probably the biggest thing.
Right. So we had like these huge leaps at the start of the automotive world, and now it's actually it's like maybe more incremental improvements that have a big impact. Yeah, cool. Well, Brandon, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. KO3, when is it available? Is it on sale now?
Yeah, so we actually launched our first sizes in May of this year.
Yeah.
So a few months ago, we had launched another batch of sizes in August. We got another batch of sizes that are coming out October 1st. And then we're going to be launching throughout 2025 and even a little bit into 2026. We've got over 120 sizes that are launching, so it's kind of a long launch plan.
Sweet. Well, thank you for your time, Brandon. Thank you for putting up with me. And the website if folks want to learn more.
bfgoodrichtires.com.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Tommy. So I take it that you ran the BFGs on the Toyotas. How were they off-road?
You know, I have no clue.
Okay, all right, fair. Why?
Well, like I had a great time off-road, and we didn't have any punctures, and like there was no problem with grip. But then the kind of off-roading we were doing wasn't really difficult enough, in my opinion, to see a big difference between the two, or to kind of feel a difference between the BFG and a Cooper or a Falcon. So I'd like to get them out here to Colorado and really put them through some of our typical tests, and then we'll have a better understanding of how they perform.
You know what I would love to do, and it's hard to do this because it just takes so much time, energy, and resources, but I think it'd be fascinating. So you just did a video with Case where you took the company's new Defender and you ran it up a trail we haven't run.
Sure.
And then part of the video I was watching, you went up a much steeper section and you got to a point where all the car was doing was just spinning tires. So you maybe got up like 50 feet, maybe not even up that trail, and it just wouldn't go any higher.
Yeah.
It would be fascinating to like do that as a test and then, back the car down, throw in a different set of tires and see if you could actually get farther up the hill.
Wouldn't have mattered.
Because
the car was completely high-centered. It wasn't a grip problem. It was a high-centered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How can we design a test that would actually...
So I was asking them about that, and they said even in their controlled environments, it's almost impossible to develop a vehicle test that's not like CAD design that simulates tire performance side by side. Because even a few minutes of differences or a slight change in surface can completely change the way a vehicle performs in a evaluation. So that's why a lot of the testing they have objective requirements they have to meet, but they have pro drivers where all they do is subjective testing on tires, and they'll change something in the tread design or the compound or the blocking and then send them out, and then those guys can tell a difference, but it's really hard to demonstrate in a scientific way.
So what would be easier to demonstrate, which we could certainly do, is go to our test track and have different off-road tires and do the basics, right? Same car, see how long it takes the car to stop from 60. That would certainly be an easy test because then you could see the difference in how many feet the vehicle stops given one tire versus the other tire. You could run a slalom course, right? But this is not a good test for off-road tires. This is a test for on-road tires. But then on-road tires very rarely go off-road, but off-road tires quite regularly go on-road, so maybe it would be a useful test. Let me know in the comments below. Is this something you guys would like to see or find useful? I'm just worried it would be kind of boring.
Yeah, I think it would be too. No, it's really tough to do tire evaluations in a fair and consistent way. Really, really, really tough. But I think it's important.
And there are other channels who do that.
Yeah,
Tire
there's like
Rack
a
does it.
tire review channel. He does an
Yeah.
excellent job.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty big world that I don't necessarily think that we're the experts in, but I definitely feel more knowledgeable on tires after going on this trip. So thank you to VFG for flying me out. And yeah.
All right, well, let me finish up with what I did because I did drive a few other cars that I described that you didn't seem to want to hear about, but I think maybe our listeners and viewers would love to know about it. So I got to drive my dream station wagon,
Okay.
which is the Audi RS6 Avant. It's got a big old twin-turbo V8 under the hood. I think it's one of the sexiest cars out there, but I had a little bit of an epiphany, and that is Audi's getting a little long in the tooth in their interior design. They have this 3-screen setup, right, where they have a screen in front of you, and they're kind of matching size screens, and there's a screen to the right and a screen below it, and then they have icons that are based on colors. So, like, I think the phone, icon is yellow, if I remember right. Could be wrong. Please don't correct me. Like the entertainment is blue. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But the interior, once upon a time, in my eyes, was like super clean and super modern. And the exterior design of the Avant certainly is all that, and the driving dynamics are also all that. I think I'd have a hard time like choosing between that and the Taycan Sports Turismo, which is also the sporty version of the Taycan, the Porsche. But the interior in the Porsche is much nicer than the interior in the Audi. I think they just need to get away from that kind of same interior they've been doing for so long. It's just almost sterile. It's that like perfect.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Not really.
Okay.
No, the problem I have with the cars you drove, Dad,
Yeah.
is they are so unholy expensive that it's tough for me to get excited about them. Like it's like you talking to me about a private jet. It's so unattainable that like I appreciate the technology, but I just like I couldn't imagine myself ever owning one.
Yeah, that Audi is just, if I remember right, it was like 100.
Okay, you can stop there. That's
But
already
but compared to the Spectre, which was 500, and the DBX 707, which is 350.
yeah.
I mean, on the affordability scale, it's still through the roof. But compared to the other ones, and the McLaren, which is also I think 350, it was relatively affordable if you live in that world. And I think there are viewers and listeners out there who hopefully have the money to buy these, or they want something that's attainable if they get to that point in their lives where they're either making that much money or somehow have won the lottery. So I don't think that just by saying, well, I can't afford it, so we shouldn't talk about it.
No, my problem is that there's so many other podcasts that specialize in these like uber luxury expensive cars.
Yeah, I get that, but we never get them. So it's kind of, I think, a refreshing change of pace to get kind of the everyman, which I think we represent and I think we do really well, take on these cars, as opposed to like listening to all the podcasts that just swoon about, the induction node and how wonderful the braking is. And to me, I come at it from a much different point of view. I come at it from kind of a dream car point of view, as opposed to, it's like watches, right? Where you're such an expert on watches that you know the subtle differences between them. To me, those subtle differences probably aren't as apparent, but I just kind of want the perspective of somebody who's won $1 million and they want to go buy a cool car. Is this a car I should buy? I think that's not a waste of time.
Okay.
All right. So that Audi, like I said, that Audi was way cool. Exterior styling, I think it's one of the sexiest cars out there. Pretty miserable fuel economy, right? But you're going to get that. But the biggest problem I have with all of those cars, and people now are bemoaning that station wagons, people aren't buying station wagons, right?
Sure.
Every automotive journalist just longs to own a station wagon, but look at the Mercedes, you look at the Audi, you look at the Porsche. They're just tiny inside, dude. I mean, the back seat, maybe I've gotten bigger and older and fatter, which I probably have, but I'll take a SUV or a crossover backseat any day over any of those. It's, as a driver, it's a hoot, but I don't think I'd want to be in the back of those. And as you know, your grandma who just called could never get in and out of those cars because they're so low. So I don't necessarily bemoan the fact that these station wagons aren't being sold, because there's just not a lot of utility. There's a lot of sport and there's a lot of sexiness, but there's not a boat ton of utility in any of these things. Maybe the best utility you could say about them is that you could lift the hatch and the dog can jump in pretty easily because they're so low to the ground. Right? And then if you live in a world, let's not say the Autobahn, but let's say you live in America, that's full of SUVs and crossovers, you're going to be looking, you're going to be looking at the exhaust pipes of a lot of lifted pickup trucks.
Yeah.
And that's not a pleasant thing to see, right?
Yeah.
So the Rolls-Royce didn't have that, right? That's got a lot of road presence, and you don't feel like you're in a race car in the world of monster trucks, and that's nice. The Artura, I don't know, dude. Me and McLarens we've had a bunch of McLarens here over the years. I've driven a bunch of McLarens, and I just find them to be very high-priced, high performance, but at the same time, high maintenance racehorses, right? They're when you drive them around town at normal speeds, they're just very kind of nervous and jittery. Infotainment's kind of laggy and old. This thing has, of course, the articulated doors that the i8 that we have, and so they're not easy to get in and out of. You can't look at the engine because they're hidden. They have a spotty reputation for reliability, and it just seems like a 911 is a much easier thing to live with and a lot easier to just drive around. And I know people who buying McLarens probably have 15 other cars, so this is not their daily driver. But I'm coming at it from a perspective of somebody who's looking at it as a kind of a daily driver. Unless you're at 10/10 in those cars where they come alive, where they become like hardwired to your brain in terms of their handling dynamics, I just would not want to live with one on a day-to-day basis. And I know that's an unfair criticism of a car that's not meant for that, but that's how I kind of look at cars.
Yeah, but why are you cool with the i8, which is very similar technology and arguably harder to get in and out of, but you're not with the McLaren because they're both plug-in hybrids?
Oh, that's easy. I love a bargain.
Well,
I'm just a crazy bargain
sure.
hound. Plus, two things. Okay, so i8 49,000
Used.
McLaren used, 9 years old used. McLaren 350,000.
So when the McLaren is $80,000,
It won't be. Look, the other thing that's about that, BMW did a moonshot with the i8 and i3, and that car is rock solid 9 years old. There's not a squeak. There's not a rattle. I've never been in a car that is that solid, right? And that well put together. I just think that because of the carbon fiber tub, it's just absolutely bulletproof.
and you don't think the McLaren's going to be like that?
No.
Okay.
No, I think the McLaren's going to have issues. BMW did a really great job. Plus, I love, and this is a subjective thing, I love the styling of the i8. To me, every McLaren looks like, if you showed me the 720, the Artura, put them next to each other, 650, I'd have a really hard time telling them apart. And I guess the same could be said for.
Pick it up.
I gotta take this.
All right, I'll keep
Why don't you
going
wrap
here.
this up
Yeah,
here?
I'll wrap it up.
Sorry, important call.
I don't mean to be down on expensive cars. I think that was wrong with me. The challenge I have is that in this world we live in, it's so hard to even me and my job. I'm very grateful to make a good living, but it's so hard, for me to envision being able to afford even a $50,000-$60,000 car brand new without some enormous car payment that over $100,000. It's just tough for me to get really excited about it. In a hobby I'm really love and passionate, but it's really cool for my dad to be able to experience that and bring it to us, and I shouldn't be so down. I know that. I'm excited that he got to drive these dream cars. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. And as always, it's been Tommy and my dad Roman. We'll see you guys next time. Head over to alltfl.com where we've got more fantastic videos just in general. Thanks guys, appreciate it.